Hello, kids. Welcome to a fraction times a fraction. So, right now, I'm going to show you how to multiply a fraction by a fraction and get to the heart of why when you multiply anything by a fraction, it gets smaller. This is one of the things about math that is so interesting. When we're really, really young, we're learning that anytime you multiply something, it gets bigger. But when you get to fractions and decimals, same thing, you multiply things and they get smaller. So it's really, really interesting to see how this is going to work here. I love the Montessori materials on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Put this where we can see it. Fraction times a fraction. And I'm going to start with 2/3 times 2/3. All right, so 2/3 times 2/3. There's my equal sign. How are we going to do this? Well, first of all, let me get out my 2/3 here. I've got 2/3 right there, and I want to take 2/3 of my 2/3. So I want to take 2/3 of this, but notice I have two pieces, and I need to break it into three parts. So how am I going to break 2/3 into three parts and then take two of those parts? So what am I going to do? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a way to turn each of these thirds into something that can be turned into and broken into three parts instead of just these 2/3 here. And what I'm going to use over here are these Skittles from a stamp game to illustrate what I'm trying to do here. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to break 2/3 into three parts. And of those three parts, I'm going to take 2/3, two of these three parts, and that will be my answer. So, how do we do this? Well, let's start with breaking this into ninths. So 1/3 is going to be broken down into 3/9. There you have it. So you got one of these thirds broken down into 3/9. The other third can also be broken down into 3/9. So why did I do this? Well, remember, I have to break this 2/3 into three parts. I can't do that like this. What I can do if I put it into ninths is break it into three equal parts, if you see here. Now that I've turned the 2/3 into my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6/9, now I can break them into three equal parts. I'm going to take each of those parts and put them here with a skittle. So 2/9 goes over here. That is 1/3 of the 2/3. Another 2/9, that is also 1/3. And another one. These added together will get me back to my 2/3, but I've divided the 2/3 into three sections here. And what I'm going to do is the answer is going to be two of the three Skittles here. So this top one here, I'm going to move out of the way. And the answer is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4/9 by taking two sets of my 2/3 there. And let's see if this works out. Well, if we look at it and we multiply the numerator by the numerator and the denominator by the denominator, what do we get? We get 4/9. Now the interesting thing here is that 4/9 is definitely less than what we started with, 2/3. This is the really fun part about fractions. There's 2/3. We multiplied that by 2/3 to find out what 2/3 of these 2/3 would be, and we found out that it was 4/9. And the math checks out here as well. So you can see it both in the concrete and in the abstract that 2/3 of 2/3, when you break 2/3 into three parts and take two of those parts, it's going to be 4/9. So that's a really, really fun concept. I love doing it like this. I love seeing visually that when you multiply a fraction by a fraction, you take a fraction of anything, you're going to get something smaller. So that was the first problem. Let me demonstrate with a few more examples. Let's do a classic. Get these out of the way in case. Let's do a classic 1/4 times 1/4. So what is 1/4 of 1/4? Well, let's take a look here. All right, so I've got a fourth here. Boom. I got to break that down into 1, 2, 3, 4 parts because I want to take 1/4 of this 1/4, and this is going to be a fourth of it. So is this, so is this, and so is this. But what is 1/4 of 1/4? So I have to break my 1/4 down into 4 parts. And the only way to do that is to break it down into 16ths, because 4 divided by 4 is, or 4 times 4 is 16. So I try my 16ths out. And I'm thrilled to have found these. I didn't know where these were for the longest time, but I found them. Yes, and that checks out. 4/16 does in fact make 1/4, but now what I have to do is take this 1/4 that I've created, even though I've divided it into 4 parts, because that's what I need to do, and I have to figure out where each one goes. So 1 goes there, 1 goes there, 1 goes there, and 1 goes there. And since I only want to know what 1/4 of the 1/4 was, I'm going to move the rest of these out of the way. It turns out that 1/4 of 1/4, 1/4 times 1/4, gives me 1/16. So when I multiplied 1/4 and I wanted to take 1/4 of that and broke it down, breaking this 1/4 piece down, that's 1/4 of this 1/4. Notice it's smaller. It takes 4 of these to create these, or to create this one. So 1/4 times 1/4 is 1/16. Classic example. Let's do 2 more, just because this is so much fun. This really does teach you visually how fractions work, because that was a mystery to me. It's like multiplication always gets bigger. Well, no, that's not the case. Not when you get to fractions and decimals. All right, let's do something a little crazy here. Let's do 2/7 times 2/3. Okay, well, there we have it. 2/7 times 2/3. Well, what are we going to do here? Okay, let's take our 2/7. What are my 7s? All right. These are my 2/7. Right there. How am I going to break those into, find 2/3 of that? Because if I do, yeah, I've got 2 parts, but I got to turn it into 3 and then take 2 of those parts. I got to take the whole here and somehow divide it into 3 and then take 2 of those parts out of the 3. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to find out how I can break my, so I got my 3 sets over here. How am I going to break my 7ths here into something that can be divisible by 3? The only thing to do is multiply them by 3, 7 by 3 to get 21, and I find out that with my 21sts here, I can divide 1/7 into 3 21sts. Visually, it works. There's the first one. Here's the second one. Once these fraction pieces get smaller, they get difficult to play with here. All right, so I've got my 2/7, but I've now transformed them into my 21sts, and I have 6 of them, and 6 is divisible by 3. So I can go ahead and start placing these, and it looks like 2 will go here, 6 divided by 3 is 2. 2 will go here, and 2 will go here. So multiplying my 2/7 and finding out what 2/3 are going to be. Here's my first, second, and third. So this is, now I want to only look at what 2/3 are. So I'm going to move this one back out of the way. And I'm going to push these down. And it looks like 2/3 of 2/7. When you multiply that, it looks like we get 4/21, 4/21. And yes, that checks out with the math as well. There you have it. Multiply numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. But you actually get to see it. This is not just some abstract concept. Literally 2/3 of 2/7 is 4/21. And actually what I'm going to do is put these on over here. 4/21. Oh, forgot my other 7th. It's not 2/3 of 1/7, it's 2/3 of 2/7. Okay, so here's my 2/7, and I want to see what 2/3 of that looks like. Oh, this is cool. This is really cool because I am literally going over that little area where they meet. And yes, visually I see it. Yeah, 4/21 is 2/3 of 2/7 here. Really, really cool. So, love that one. That was really cool. Very awesome. All right, let's do one more just for fun. Let's do 4/5 times 3/4. Okay, let's do 4/5 times 3/4. Well, it looks like with my Skittles, I'm going to need 4 of them because I'm going to break my 4/5 down into 4 parts, and then I'm going to take my answer as 3 of those 4 parts. And I'm going to need 4/5. So let's get my 4/5 out here. 1, 2, 3, 4/5 right here. I could show you put together what they look like. They're going to look kind of like a PacMan. Yep, there's my PacMan, buddy. Hey, buddy. So that's 4/5. But how do I break 4/5 down into 3/4? Like, what is 3/4? What? How am I going to do this? So how am I going to break 4/5 down into 3/4? Okay, 1, 3, 4. Is it going to be 3/5? Well, let's take a look. Let's find out. So we've got 4/5 that we want to break down into. We got to break this down into fourths, don't we? Well, how do we turn a 5th into something that's divisible and multiplied by 4 or whatever? I think we got to put 20ths. I think that's what we need here. So let's turn these into 20ths. I found some 12ths in the 21st. That was interesting. I almost used them, pulled them out. Okay. I want to know what 3/4 of these 4/5 is. So I have to have a way to break this down evenly. So I'm turning each of these into a 20th. By the way, guys, at the end of this one, you're going to see something a little bit different because this is the first one that we're going to be able to reduce. Could have made my life easier, but I'm just going through the process here. So it looks like I could divide my 4/5 into how many 20ths? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 16 20ths. And now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sets here. Oh, wow, this works out. This is great for me. So I got to put them into 4 sets here. Okay, well, that is 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh man, this one is working out. I think I just learned something too. Dude, this does work. What could I have done to make my life easier here? Well, I'll show you in a minute here. Wow. So those 4/5, I could break them down into 4 equal parts pretty easily, actually, right? Boom, boomity boom. And I want 3/4 of those. So I'm going to move this one out of the way. Put these guys down. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I move the stuff down from the pieces down from those Skittles, and it looks like I get a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 20ths. But Mr. Adam, didn't you have didn't you say a 5th was 4 of these? Yeah. Boom. 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 It looks like 12 20ths is the same as 3/5. Because if you take 12 and divide by 4, you get 3. And if you take 20 and you divide by 4, you get 5, 3/5. Now, what could I have done here to make my life easier? A little hack here. I found out that 12 20ths is the same as 3/5. What I could have done here to make my life easier, if I move these out of the way, is I could have said, well, here are my 4/5. Okay, there's my 4/5. And I need to break them down into 4 parts. Well, each one of these can go here. And I need to take 3 of those 4 parts. And there you have it. You have 3/5. How that looks when you do it in the abstract looks like this. It's a little trick. Notice here you have the numerator and the denominator are the same. This is called canceling out. I can cancel this 4 out and make it a 1 because we know we're going to multiply this side by the bottom part by 4. And we know we're going to multiply the top part, the numerator, by 4. So why don't we just make our life easier and reduce that down to 1 on both sides? And guess what? That becomes 1/5 times 3 over 1, and that does in fact give us 3/5. Really cool. So that is just a fun little tip, kids, as you get more proficient with multiplying fractions. Because 12 20ths is the exact correct answer, but I could have done it and made my life a little bit easier by simply moving the 5ths over there. But again, like, I love showing just that how multiplying fractions just makes things smaller. I love it. So in fact, if I've got my 3/5 over here, and I have to show again that I started out with 4/5 over here, again, 3/5, I'm sorry, 3/4 of 4/5 is going to give me 3/5. So that's really, really cool. I've got PacMan here, and I've got a really hungry PacMan there. All right. So this has been a presentation on multiplying fractions times fractions. The really cool part for me is that anytime you multiply anything by a fraction, it gets smaller. And that is the most important thing I want you kids to take away from this lesson. Anytime you multiply anything by a fraction, it gets smaller. So I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. I know I did. I have a ton of fun trying to figure out this stuff and really, really diving into the concrete element of Montessori education and really figuring out visually why something is the way it is. And that's the whole point. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Have a great day.